Yo, we're releasing a new WizardChess update where we're finally giving you all access to the highest difficulty ranks of the game. As a reminder, WizardChess is our tactical chess roguelike that we've been developing in Steam Early Access for the past several years. The content in this latest patch has been available in developer mode for a little while, but until recently it just wasn't really done cooking. Games are typically meant to be fun, but sometimes a mechanic just isn't working, or in the case of a game like WizardChess, a mechanic that was perfectly fine stops working. Reworking a game mechanic is pretty much always full of doubt. It's a chance that you're just going to make it worse. Was the idea even good in the first place? And at the end of the day, you might feel like it was better before you made any of the changes you've made. And obviously the way to counteract this is feedback. The absolute ideal situation is to sit down and watch someone play your game in person, and then you can verify, is there even a problem here, and are any of my changes having the intended effect? But what are you supposed to do before something is technically playable? It is a lot of time and effort to rework a mechanic to get it to a playable state just to find out that it still doesn't work. And more importantly, in that meantime, how can you trust your evaluation of whether your ideas are good or bad without actual player feedback? As an example, after some of our recent changes to the trait system, I've noticed myself avoiding cursed deals on the map. To recap, cursed deals offer you a left and a right-hand path that you must choose between. Each of these options has both a positive and a negative element to it, giving the player a difficult trade-off where they need to assess what their party would actually benefit from. When we originally implemented cursed deals, our goal was to give players more ways to diversify their party using bulk transformation actions on units. The Fey biome, where you face Arabella, the Fey Queen, has by far the most mechanical surface area in terms of units and enemies and encounter types in the whole game, and we wanted to give you an opportunity to shake up your run if you felt like you weren't being able to access any of that content. We wanted to create the feeling of, maybe I shouldn't take this deal, but I want to, and give players a creative choice. One of our design goals over the last 12 months has explicitly been to give players more control over their party, and specifically give them interesting ways to exert that control at the right times. This effort has largely paid off, and there are a lot more interesting ways to build your party in the game, but as a result, we just broke the cursed deals. Now, the shops are so much more impactful that there's just not as much use for a full party reroll room, and cursed deals began to feel like a very high cognitive complexity decision that was producing little to no reward for me as a player. I didn't actually realize this at first. What I noticed was my subconscious avoidance of the cursed deal encounters on the map, and then I reasoned my way towards a theory that felt compelling. But is it actually right? When we're examining a given mechanic in WizardChess, there are probably 6 or so steps we tend to go through. The first is to recall the context of why we made our original decisions. We put the mechanics in the game for a reason, those decisions made sense to us at the time, we should revisit them. And that leads into the second step, understand the feeling that we're trying to create with this mechanic. Ultimately, games are about pressing emotional buttons in players' minds using systems and designs that are clever. We have to know what that feeling we're going for is, and then we need to compare that to how we feel while we're playing the game. If you can see a mismatch in your feeling while playing your game, it's not going to work for players either. You can rely on your own judgment. From this, you should form a hypothesis, which is point 4, that you need to collect some evidence for. This can be further testing, research in other games, getting players to play your current game and seeing how they interact with it. From here, step 5, you run some experiments. You try new ideas out in a scrappy way where you check if they feel good. You evaluate the outcome, which is the final step. Do these changes actually feel better to you? Well, in that case, maybe you could turn them into a prototype. Getting to a prototype, I would say, is often the hardest part. Checking if a prototype works is pretty easy, but you can hone this sense as a developer of what is and isn't feeling right while you work on your game. And I would argue this is actually one of the main skills of being a good game designer, is building this intuitive sense of, does it feel right? If it sounds difficult, it is, but it is also one of the most satisfying problem-solving activities you can possibly engage in, which I think is probably why most of us really make games. We've also been applying this to the upcoming boss battle we're working on against Arabella herself, which is technically the final boss of the game. And if you think from a feelings point of view, a good final boss needs to be spectacular, it needs to be surprising, subversive, it needs to be exhausting, right? Like, the player needs to feel as if they have given more than they thought they had to give by the end of the fight. And It's not easy to nail these design constraints. We have redesigned the final boss from scratch, I think 3 times, and probably partially redesigned it even more. One of the fun challenges of designing a pseudo-novel tactics game is that a lot of the conventional ideas for bosses just don't work. And I've learned again and again in WizardChess that it just doesn't matter how cool a mechanic sounds if it doesn't feel good to play against it. More philosophically, fun always grows from a seed. You can't build the whole game at once, and as you layer mechanic on mechanic, everything will affect everything. No decision can ever be safe forever, but the boss fight is finally starting to feel right. And we'll talk more about the design of this fight in particular in a future video when it's been battle tested, but I'm really excited for people to start being able to try it out and see if our prototype actually works. Sometimes people are surprised to hear that there's no crystallized singular vision of what WizardChess is going to become. Pretty much each week we pick up the game and we see a superposition of possible futures for it, and our job as developers is to navigate that space, by gut and by reason, to deliver a game that we're proud of and we think that is as fun as possible for players. At times this has been absurdly difficult with WizardChess, but it does seem to be worth it. The game keeps getting better and better, and it plays better than ever before right now, and for me, that matters a lot more than sprinting to the finish. It's worth saying that if your primary goal is to make money from making games, this is probably not the ideal way to be thinking. Rework is very expensive and is typically risky. It doesn't always pay off, but it's important, I think, not to give in to the sunk cost fallacy when designing games. If you step back and look at the whole puzzle for long enough, it often snaps into focus and a fairly simple solution appears. In our case, we found ourselves wondering, well, what if we just take the cursed deal room, scrap the UI, and replace it with a little gamble button, and then, using this button, you could reroll units from your army as many times as you like until they become a chicken, at which point they can't be rerolled again. This is stupidly simple, kind of funny, but it actually creates the feeling that we were intending, using much less effort for both the player and the developer. You're naturally going to be curious to try a mechanic like this because you know that it could be good for you, but it's risky, and you can reevaluate that risk every time you press the button without reading lots of text and making a really complicated decision. You can just have fun with it and make a creative choice, which really is achieving the goals that we wanted at the outset with a lot less code in between the player and the outcome. As always, I should say, we're still iterating on this content, and it's not done until I say it's done, so we still lack an ending to the game, but we're closing in on the 1.0 launch scope at this point. There's plenty of tweaks and bug fixes and more secrets to pack in, but still no release date yet, despite talking about the final boss. So, I encourage you to please check out the latest changes and let us know what you think. You can leave a comment on YouTube here, you can join our Discord, you could leave one on Steam. All the links are in the description for all this stuff. I just wanted to say thank you for all the support on this new style of video. I've been seeing all the feedback from everyone and I really appreciate it. I'm thinking about doing a video on the tools we use to both build and manage the game next, so if that sounds interesting to you, please leave a comment down below to let me know. Until then, I'll see you in the next one. Peace out.